Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first CERC Talk of 2021 and the kickoff to our digital transformation series. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. And for those joining for the first time, Mimi Marcus, CERC Talks webinar coordinator. We hope you find the discussion beneficial and encourage your active participation, especially today throughout the discussion. Just to highlight some of the participation tools, even though you are muted, you can utilize the chat feature for any comments that you have during the discussion, as well as the Q&A module for any questions. We do ask that you keep those separate in terms of comments to the chat and your questions to the Q&A. You can also utilize the upvote feature within the Q&A to chime in or push questions that are similar to your own to the top of the list. And also, if you are joining by phone only and you'd like to be included in the Q&A or the chat, feel free to send an email to cerctalks@stevens.edu. That's talks plural and Stevens, STEVENS.edu. An evolution to our CERC Talk series and a welcome improvement is the addition of our series moderator, Dr. Dan DeLaurentis. Dr. DeLaurentis is a man of many hats and serves as our CERC chief scientist, a CERC Research Council member with particular focus in the enterprise systems and systems of systems research area, in addition to being a longstanding CERC principal investigator. Additionally, Dr. DeLaurentis serves as director for the Institute of Global Security and Defense Innovation and the Center for Integrated Systems in Aerospace, as well as being professor of aeronautics and astronautics at Purdue University. Dr. DeLaurentis will be introducing our speaker and the talk, as well as leading the discussion following today's presentation. Though again, feel free to continue to incorporate your questions and comments throughout the session. But with that, I turn that over to you, Dr. DeLaurentis.
Thank you, Mimi, and indeed, welcome to everyone to this first CERC Talk of 2021 and in the digital transformation series. Only good news to share with you in my short introduction here. First and foremost, our speaker, Dr. Willy Donaldson, is really just the perfect speaker, in my opinion, to kick this off, this digital transformation series off. Because he's a very engaging speaker, and he's already expressed his openness to dialogue during this presentation. So as was discussed, please feel free to pose your questions. He's promised ample time, significant time in the hour we have for questions and answers after his presentation. So more good news there. And again, as important, if not most important, he comes with a background that I think is really important for us to start off here. And that is from a place that most of us, certainly myself included, haven't spent much time, any time. And that is really in the C-suite, in the top leadership of organizations, where sort of the should we do and how should we do it of digital transformation is seen in a much different lens. And we researchers especially need to have this insight of what the decisions look like at that point in an organization. And so again, so thrilled. So very briefly, you can see Dr. Donaldson's very significant bio online. While we both share the current status of wearing many hats and directorships, he comes with 35 years experience running 7 or 8 companies, some of which he started, unlike myself, for sure. So again, a tremendous background. And really, I think, really great to see him in academia now directing the Business Institute and the Biotechnology and Management programs at Christopher Newport University. And so again, from almost every dimension, just the perfect speaker to kick us off. Willy, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Terrific. Well, Dan, thank you very much for those very kind words, and I really look forward to it. And I thank everyone online today for your time. I know you're scattered around the world, and your email box is full, and your voicemail box is full, and so taking time out of your busy day to listen, and I'll try to make it worthwhile. And so, as Dan said, my background comes from 35 years of being a hired CEO and running many companies, including publicly traded companies and international joint ventures, and doing business around the world. And that's kind of a unique perspective. So I am a systems engineer by training, and as well as industrial in the early days before we talked about systems engineering. And just to give you some background, my father gave me all the early systems thinking texts when I was in high school. And so von Burton, Lanfey, and Ackoff, and Churchman, and Checkland. And I've often wondered whether that was for punishment or for inspiration, but I took it as inspiration. And, as I mentioned, have been in the C-suite for almost 40 years now. And that's just a different view of the world than most systems engineers get to have. And so that's the perspective I want to try to bring for you today. And from that chair, I've seen organizations install this kind of software and go through these sorts of transformations up close and personal, and wrestled with it. And I think that's helpful. And as Dan also mentioned, I've crossed over to, whether that you consider it the dark or the light side, teach in a liberal arts university. And I spend most of my time thinking about systems in relations to leadership and organizational behavior and philosophy and the social sciences, because what I've found is this, what we all call the soft side, soft systems engineering, is really the hard part. The hard engineering is hard, but the soft side is what's really a struggle when it comes to the transformation, and particularly digital transformation. So I'm going to get right to the bottom line here. And you should see from this, and Dan mentioned it, what I see is just a fundamental difference in viewpoints. And we all know, as systems thinkers and systems engineers, our perspectives and where we view the system from changes our perspective dramatically. So if you think about it from a C-suite perspective, and I also use that term for executive directors for not-for-profits and commanders-in-chief of a particular deployment of a Ministry of Defense organization, they're charged with looking outward and forward. Some would even say upward, right? So they're thinking about and worrying about on a regular basis customer and beneficiary opinions and interaction and the way people are interacting with it. So that's an external view. They're worried about market share and mission success. And that's, again, that resides in the external world. They're worried about scale and reach and scope. And that resides in the outside world. And then they're worried about earnings and impact, which is the function of doing all of these things well and attending to all those. And finally, last, certainly not least important, but last on the list, is they think about internal performance as a means to deliver the above to the outside world. They don't sit and think about it all day long and worry necessarily about what's going on. And so you can immediately see a perspective challenge here, and that is the digital transformation is fundamentally focused inward and downward. And often through a technological lens, or is technology centric, which may or may not fit at all with a view of the world in the C-suite. And so that begs some really important challenges for systems engineers as we wrap our minds around how to think about digital transformation. So I think looking forward, the success is we have to couch our digital transformation initiatives in terms that engage the C-suite, use their language, use their lenses, use their metrics. And that's what I want to talk more about today as we go through this talk. And that's not easy. And let me give you one of the first challenges that you're going to run into. What I've found over the years is that most C-suites are terrifically systematic. They are not very systemic. They don't often get the systemicity that we think of. So this is an example of a major financial institution that all of you on this call would know. And I asked them, the assembled senior managers, 84 of them, is your enterprise a system? And 100% said yes. Then I asked them, is your enterprise a subsystem of the larger holding company enterprise? And the answer was, again, yes. 100% of them, all of them agreed they were living in a system and they were part of a system. I asked them if their division or department or team was part of a subsystem of the greater system, which was a subsystem of the even larger system. And they all answered yes. And then I asked them, how many of you have ever studied systems theory, systems science, systems dynamics, systems thinking, systems engineering, any of the disciplines that we've looked hard at and studied. And this is a revealing number here, folks. So we have a lot of people who are very systematic, but not systemic. They don't really understand what systemicity is and what it looks like. And that's a challenge we've got to overcome. And we've got to talk in language that they can understand. The good news is they see the dynamics. They just don't have the language and mental models necessarily to talk about it the right way. And so that's also an opportunity for this crowd. So some good news, bad news in the area of digital transformation. Jeff Bezos has said there's going to be no alternative to this. This is company. This is coming, right? This is the wave of the future that organizations are going to ride, and visionary companies will carve out this new strategic option and will make the transformation. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, where is this really being successful? And most of the time, it is at inception. Startups don't worry about transforming because they have nothing to transform. Elon Musk and a lot of his startups, he doesn't worry about what was done in the past. He's starting a digital transformed company from the start. He's starting a digital initiative. And that's one of the challenges, is that we are dealing particularly with established organizations. They are going to have a hard time adapting. They're not going to make this transition. And it won't be because they can't technologically. It won't be because they don't have the needed requirements to do it. It's because they will fail to adapt. They will fail to change and transform as required by the marketplace. So that's an opportunity, right? And the opportunity is that as MIT and Capgemini have studied the C-suite, most CEOs get it. They know that the digital economy is going to impact their industry. They just don't know how, and they don't know how to execute on it. And that's the opportunity for us as systems engineers, to be in the lead and educate them in that area. But we're going to have to use their terms and their knowledge. And we're going to have to break some of the old habits that are so comfortable for a lot of organizations. So unfortunately, the bad news here in this whole transformation is that most of the companies that Chris Beatty's seen, that I've seen in the work that I've done in my consulting, are really not integrating this from the start. Strategy and transformation are two different animals, and I'll talk more about this as we go forward. And we've got to get those two together. That's a real challenge, that we're not making digital transformation strategic, and that's really where we've got to get. And unfortunately, continuing the bad news saga, is most large enterprises are remarkably siloed from my experience. And some of you may be shaking your head and have seen this. And if you don't know about the term bounded rationality, I'm going to talk more about it here very soon. And so I want to share with you some of the reasons I think this occurs and that you'll see. One of the questions that's been posed, and I'll stop here and answer it, many leaders want a pilot program to feel out digital transformation. Is this the right approach to fully integrate, and what would be best first steps? Actually, that's not a bad way to go, is find a division, find a department that can do this. It tends to not be broad enough. The other thing to do is go outside the organization and find those companies that already have done this sort of transformation and bring them back in. The futurist William Gibson famously said, the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So let's go out and take your senior managers, let them see how the world could be. And we'll talk more about that as we go through. Marissa's got a great question, is how to talk to management when digital transformation is a matter of high performance tools without regard to systems engineering process. That's one of the problems, is most C-suites don't really understand systems engineering. They don't understand systemicity, and they certainly don't understand SysML diagrams, right? So if you talk to them in terms of your high performance tools and the number of teraflops you're going to get, you're going to lose them right out of the chute. So you've got to start talking in their language and putting the transformation in their language. So back to this notion of silos and bounded rationality. And I'll just give you an example, a major manufacturer that I've been working with, and they have committed to digital transformation. They've announced it to the analysts. They've identified specific projects they're going to deliver it on. And now they're stuck. They have 5 departments, what they call departments. And here's where they are. It's 4 different plans for digital transformation with 4 different languages, timelines, different tool sets, different vendors, you name it. Now, some of you may say, well, wait a minute, what's going on with the 5th? Well, the 5th has said, sorry, we're already behind on delivering our numbers. We're not going to participate at all. We're just going to put our heads down and work harder to get to the future. And so this is a major transformation problem here, and the C-suite is reluctant to engage because they've already committed to the analysts, and now they're going to have a hard time backing off of their specific earnings per share goals, their specific deliverable goals. And so that's not a technical problem. That is a social and technical solution problem. So if you go back to this notion of bounded rationality, what I found is most large organizations are getting hung up. As we know, as systems thinkers, that the real world, there are no boundaries. There are no separate systems. It's one large continuum. So there are only boundaries of thought and perception and social agreement, right? These are artificial mental model boundaries. And the paradox, the cruel paradox is we have to have them to have discussions around complex topics. But we have to know the purpose of those discussions. And so if you think about it from the C-suite perspective, the management paradox they're faced with and we're faced with is this is just too complex. You cannot take a complex socio-adaptive system and manage it straight on. You have to parse it and break it down, but you should see as a systems thinker, right here is the fundamental challenge. Systems thinking was a reaction to reductionist thought that breaks things down into these departments. But a lot of the C-suite views the world because they have to. They have to break this down. The paradox is you have to break this animal down into its component parts to get it to work properly, but we lose sight of that and bounded rationality kicks in and we start to optimize these departments. And so these boundaries get set up and people start reacting and behaving and making decisions as if those boundaries existed. And that's problematic. And only the C-suite can mediate those disputes. So Rodney's pointed out the maximum culture eats strategy for breakfast is a pain point and a barrier to adopting DT principles. It's absolutely true. Culture will swamp this. The system will fight these changes unless you give it a reason to do that. And the interesting paradox is that people will defend the system because management has set up the prior system, the old system, specifically to benefit them. And they've been told them that that's how they need to do. So you're having to rewire everybody. And one of the problems is there's no bandwidth, as the client I just shared with you. They've already planned and told the community when they're going to deliver this transformation, even if that number is not legitimate. And so we'll come back to that, Rodney. That's a great observation, a great point. So bounded rationality, if you haven't studied, is a concept I would have you look at. Herbert Simon in Models of Man talked about it, and that's that it's this notion that if an individual's rationality will be, their decisions will be limited by the tractability of the decision problem. If they're charged with only running finance or only running operations, or if that's all they've ever seen, cognitive limitations of the mind, if that's the way they've always thought about the world, they're probably going to dismiss and diminish the other areas available. Time to make the decision. Their email boxes are full, their voicemail boxes are full. So are they going to think through this and take the time, back to the question that was posed, and typically not, or the perceived or actual limits of their knowledge, these boundaries. I can't go do that because I'm in IT or I'm in finance or some combination of the above. And when people are faced with those limitations, and we know this as systems thinker, they're going to act as what Simon called satisficers. In fact, he said, we're all just blundering satisficers in complex systems. So we seek local solutions that work for us rather than optimal and systemic ones. And that's, I think, the fundamental issue of how we get so sideways in so many large organizations. And I think this bounded rationality comes from, really, it's baked in through three fundamental processes that are near and dear to the C-suite's heart. The first is strategy deployment, development and strategy deployment, how we roll strategy down through the organization. If you're familiar with Google's OKRs, objectives and key result areas, whatever the cascade you use to drive strategy through the organization. We'll talk more about that. Operational total shareholder return, or OTSR, is another technique that all of the publicly traded companies and all the private equity firms and all of the firms are driven to do. And then finally, incentives. So let's look at each one of those and take them. If we look at OKRs, or any process for taking strategy and rolling it down through the organization, as systems thinkers, we can already see, one, the benefit of this, work breakdown structure, and two, the danger, right? As I roll this down, am I keeping the strategic inputs? Am I keeping purpose and clarity through, and am I mitigating the challenges here? Because if not, what's going to happen is I'm going to start to optimize this node, and then this node, and this node, and this node may be it. And so what's happened often is bounded rationality creeps in here if the C-suite doesn't tend to this. So here's a fundamental process that is highly systematic, and most organizations do very well, except it's not systemic if they don't tend to all the connections and all the things, because the digital twin doesn't care about any of these boundaries. The digital twin doesn't see any of the boundaries or the politics or the challenges that come with this reductionist thinking. So as Maurice Dio had said, the sum of optimal solutions in the silo doesn't make global optimal solutions. And that's not intuitive. And I teach in a business school, Maurice, and that's one of the problems. We bring in students and we teach them finance and accounting and marketing and sales and operations, and we tell them, go forth and optimize those areas. Well, that's not a good thing to tell them, because that's not the way systems work, as we all know. And so every organization that we're working with does this and drives it down, but we typically don't tend to this bounded rationality problem. The second, OTSRs, or operational total shareholder return, is the way funded companies look at this, and it's driven by the return on equity. The DuPont identity is return on equity, and we all know that that's net income over equity. But the DuPonts broke it down to operationalize it, and they broke it into net income over sales and sales over assets and assets over equity. And for those of you who doubt them, just cross these out and we're back to net income over equity. But what they pointed out is, now I have a term which is sales efficiency. And so I'm going to drive on sales. How efficient are every one of my sales? And you can see here that I can drive sales efficiency and profit growth. If I drive my sales up and my margins stay the same, my profit's going to be higher. If I drive my sales up and my margins improve, I'm going to have higher growth. And then this is a term of asset efficiency. How hard am I driving my assets and turning my assets? And if I do that really well, and I do both of these well, I generate higher cash flow. And that gives me the operating total shareholder return that most organizations are looking for. And I'll point out that if you're not a for-profit entity, every government and not-for-profit, you can construct a similar metric cascade that drives mission success, and again, driven right off of the strategic plan. So the problem comes when we operationalize this. It's called operating total shareholder return, and we tip it into exactly what we talked about in the strategic planning process. As I flow this down through the organization, the danger is that I'm not going to be maintaining the fidelity that I needed for a transformational event to occur up here at this level. So am I losing the synergy that has to occur for digital transformation? Am I losing it here? And am I setting up bounded rationality in this particular process? And yet it's a process that, again, the C-suite loves this process, and they're typically good at it, but it is systematic and not systemic. And that's what we almost build in the silos as we go through our organizations. And it's not something most C-suites really understand well. And finally, the third thing that we do is we then overlay our incentives over top of those two other processes. And that just assures that bounded rationality is going to be the norm. No one's going to walk away from their paycheck, from their incentive check. They're going to defend that to the death. And they're not going to be viewing transformation all that well, like the fifth division in my example, where they just said, "Phooey on you. We have our marching orders. We're not going to attend to that issue." So Rodney has put a question, arguably the siloing effect is a symptom of organizations that are structured hierarchically. Absolutely. And again, this is the management paradox that I write about in my book and talk about so much. And that is, you have to do this, but hierarchy doesn't have to mean inefficiency. It just, you can, I happen to use a holarchy, which I think is better, but you've got to look at digital transformation. It has to be, as Rodney says, agnostic to the boundaries, right? And because the digital twin doesn't care about the boundaries, doesn't see them, doesn't necessarily have to be flatter. It just, you have to attend to the communications issues. You have to attend to the organizational behavior issues that go on that swamp most of these things. Dean Bunny said, could homegrown digital incubators create an opportunity for established C-suites to eventually morph into it? Absolutely. What I'm seeing is if we can get the C-suite to see the transformation and see it in their terms, Dean, if we can talk to the C-suite in their terms, and I'm going to talk about that more in a second, that's what we have to do. So again, what I see out there, and I think one of the big challenges that we're all dealing with is this siloed views of the world where they just don't see it. And so I'm just attending to my part of the view. And we see these arguments that, mine's green, yours red, mine's better, and it's just not helpful. And we've known this for a long time. W. Edwards Deming talked about that. And that's this notion of systems feedback and the interactions. That's where the change has to occur, is in the feedback, the interactions, the hierarchical structures, the reporting structures, the incentives are what change transformation. Because if not, those internal restrictions, those boundaries people are going to do bounded rationality, and they're going to optimize their particular space. And now the organization is going to reside at that steady state where that constraint becomes the constraint for the whole system. And the way we've always done it around here, this is what I'm getting paid to do. And you've got to interrupt that chain as we go through. So I'll give you an example. Major government contractor that I worked with, a board member asked me to get involved. We started working, and one of the concerns that he had was that they were struggling with project management. And so we got the 7 members of the C-suite together. I asked them about this question, and they started arguing about project management. One said it was program management, one project, one said it was the same, they weren't. So I got them to state on a piece of paper individually their view of project management. I got 7 different mental models with 7 different languages. Not terrible, and any one would have worked, but this is the kind of problem that we deal with. And the digital twin, again, can't deal with this kind of silo and this kind of interrelationship that just doesn't work. So what we need, and we all know this and we get this, is this shared system view, and we've got to get the C-suite to begin viewing it. So here's the digital transformation journey as I see it, what's required in green, and what I'm seeing, and I'm sure many of you on this call are seeing as you go through. Typically the organization is in a siloed analog state, and in the systemogram, we got to get it to an integrated digital state. So that we have to have a compelling vision for why that has to occur. And so that's going back to some of the questions, what I've said. Let's take the C-suite out and show them the compelling vision from their terms of what this will do for their organization. That we've got to get them engaged, because right now I'm just seeing that it's a delegated project. And I think we saw this with Peter Senge's great book, The Fifth Discipline. I think most C-suites grabbed that. As a systems thinker, I was like, hallelujah, people are finally talking about this stuff the way we ought to be talking about it. Most CEOs gave it to their HR function and said, this is about a learning organization. That means training. Go build me a learning organization through training. So it can't be a delegated project. It has to come from the top. We have to think about reinventing the company. It's not reinventing the technology. It's not reinventing systems engineering. It's reinventing the company and the people and the reporting structures and the communications plans and the incentive plans. And if not, we're just going to get digitized silos. We have to have common priorities and plans, right, rather than competing ones. One of the big functions that I see, and I think Mark Sampson is on this call, will testify, is the organizational readiness is just nowhere near where you think it is to use the tools. The tools, I've seen them all. They're brilliant. There's the coolest stuff we can do, but that the technology readiness level of 4.5 doesn't work for an organizational readiness level of 1.5. And then again, this is just going to take time. And particularly if you're running a publicly traded company, time is your enemy and you just don't have a lot of time. And that's where we've got to talk in language that they can understand, et cetera. So let me come back to some of the questions. Can you describe an example of where systems engineering failed or succeeded in overcoming the challenge of whole systems complexity and bounded rationality? Yeah, I think there are a number. It tends to be in much smaller organizations that are not on many people's radar screens. It's really, really hard to do well at a large organization. The ones that do it are actually training people in systems thinking, getting and viewing the world that way. It's just that there are very few of those. And then Joris has pointed out that, you know, a lot of high-tech organizations and even low-tech for that operate on a global scale, and you have to attend to the cultural differences. People view the world differently and speak different languages. And so you've got to be sensitive. And so again, we're right back to, this isn't about technology. This is all about the organizational behavior issues and communications issues and philosophy issues, et cetera. So here are the three keys, and they're the challenges, folks. And that is, we've got to get the C-suite to think in systems. It's very rare. And to do that, we're going to have to start using their language and their lenses. And so Jacques' question is, so reassuming the cascading OKRs to sub-organization and engaging people, that's one of the key drivers. Absolutely. If we've got to maintain that fidelity of transformation down through the organization when you're going through the OKR process and through the OTSR process and through the incentive process, that's why I say the C-suite's the only group that I know that can mediate those disputes and make those kinds of calls. You've got to have the C-suite support. Usually it's lip service and engagement. We've got to make it strategic. And I'm going to talk more about that here. And we've got to have a compelling reason for doing this. This isn't about systems engineering toys and how smart we are. This is about, if we don't do this, we will be left behind. So strategic, return on investment, preferably both. We've got to get to that point. And so here's some things that I think we need to do. Is we've got to demonstrate how digital transformation will improve the customer, user, or beneficiary journey, right? Remember what I started with. The C-suite is looking in the outside world. All of the benefit has to come from there. So we need to talk about better engagement with our customers or our stakeholders. We need to talk about shorter sales cycles. How will digital transformation give us a faster time to decision for a customer to choose us versus somebody else? How does it give us greater stickiness in the marketplace where they won't get rid of our products? They won't go to someone else. How does it give us a better P-win in our contracting? How does it get us better product or service bundling so that for every customer, we infect them to the greatest level we can with our disease, right? How do we get greater follow-on opportunities through digital transformation? How does the digital transformation make our outside view better and bring it into us faster? How do we demonstrate that it's going to enhance or enable growth and reach and scope? Right? Can we identify faster M&A integration? Can we identify better growth? Can we identify better development of our people through using a digital twin? Can we get to faster response time, faster time to market, faster delivery, et cetera? So Dean has pointed out, based on your earlier comment, tools would not be an issue from inception. No, I mean, this is all about re-envisioning. If you're familiar with the IDEO design thinking model, if you're not, I would encourage you to get involved with it. They start with empathy with the customer. Go learn what the customer's going through and walk your digital transformation back from the customer journey. That's where the C-suite's looking. And as systems engineers, guilty as charged, we tend to think inside and look at our tools. And that's where startups are ahead. They're looking at they've got a closer connection with the marketplace typically. We have to demonstrate how digital transformation is going to increase differentiation from a competitor, which helps with all of these other things. And we then demonstrate how it's going to reduce costs and drive efficiencies. But let's start with how it makes us a better provider of our products or services or delivering on our mission. And so it's an interesting twist. And I shared this with a CEO of a software company last week, is I think perhaps our best partners in this battle are marketing and business development executives, not engineers, not the IT department, not the finance people. Let's go energize the people who are engaging with the customers and show them what we can do for them to get to that point. So in short, folks, we've got to demonstrate how digital transformation is strategic. And, Bill's pointed out, I like your comment that startup organizations are often more successful with transformation plus strategy. And that's the good news for startups is they don't have to transform anything. They can just do it whole cloth and come out of the ground. A lot of the organizations I ran, the startups, we use these tools right from the start. So we didn't have to change anybody's mind. We didn't have to change the current incentive structures or the current organizational structures. And so it's important that we think that way. And so I'll give you some more context as the way I view the world as a systems engineer. And that is that I look at design, flowing from engineering with, highly structured design that's structured and scientific and dispassionate, and art on this side, which is, unstructured. And I look at systems thinking and systems engineering in a very similar way. And I think we tend to get hung up in the hard part of system and the structured part of it. And it's very systematic. This is where digital transformation resides. This is the work you're going to be doing. This is where you need the mindset, I think, to get into the C-suite. So I think that's all I've got for this wonderful audience, and open the floor to questions and answer some of these questions that are in the chat. So Bill Howell has one comment here that you mentioned that rarity of systems thinkers. Is this a search for the 1 in 10,000? And the answer is yes, Bill. There are very few who've thought deeply as we have. The good news is most people know they're living in a system. We've just never given them a language to talk about it and understand the archetypes that they're seeing and understand the behaviors. Remember, Deming said that upwards of 94% of all the mistakes, misunderstandings, misdirections, faults, flaws were systemic. Most people want to do the right thing. They're just led by the system to do the wrong thing or something that's just not optimized. So if we start training people in this, so a number of my customers are putting systems universities in their corporate universities, right? In my companies, the first module of my corporate universities was an orientation to our company in using systems thinking. Here's how we view the world and how we want you to view the world. So I think that's part of the long lever that we have, is getting people to think this way. Unfortunately, the ego of a lot of C-suite participants is they already think they know everything in the world. So they're going to have a hard time believing that they should go back to school, but hopefully we can get through to them.
Willy, could I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
Mimi, maybe we can unmute the people that Willy is answering their questions, and maybe that would accentuate the dialogue if folks can keep adding things to the Q&A. Is that possible, Mimi?
Yeah, absolutely. If folks would utilize the raise hand feature so that I'm sure
Right.
that they actually have a microphone set up to facilitate that, absolutely. Uh,
Okay.
and I should probably also note that I've been keeping up in the Q&A to note the ones that Willie that you've responded to, though I think some of the questions were a little bit compounded, so we may need to look at the answered quote unquote questions to fully continue that dialogue. But yeah, if anybody, Bill, if you'd like to know if you're okay with being unmuted, we can do so. Bill Howell to kind of fully flesh out your thought.
Well, let me go back to one here. There was Christopher Hoffman who said, I prefer to flip the phrases on the slide of what needs to be done. So I've gone back to that, Christopher, and that is, yeah, you're absolutely right. I would just leave the term digital transformation off, right? But the first thing to do is understand how we're going to make the customer journey better, and then enable that with digital transformation. But that's the only way. If we don't demonstrate how digital transformation is going to do that, we just sort of lose the battle before you even get started. So absolutely right. Thomas Holland has a question. How can an organization recognize when it has achieved digital transformation? Again, I would go back to the prior question. It's not about digital transformation. It's when you stop talking about having to transform anything, you're there. You know, when customers are having seamless time engaging with your customers, so you'll never get there. You know, I think we're all getting very frustrated with artificial intelligence and machine learning answering systems, right? That's a place that we're going to have to continue to do some work. A lot of organizations think they've arrived because no one ever talks to them anymore. And that's because we're fed up. We'd love to talk with somebody. So you're never done asking. You know, one of the problems with C-suites is they get locked into the old recipe and the way it's worked forever. And then they're going to defend that. The good ones blow it up all the time and challenge their most firmly held beliefs and challenge the way they've been doing things. I used to regularly call into my office and just walk around to see if we were doing stupid stuff, because we're humans. I know we're going to do that and be open to that. But you also have to train an organization to be able to look at itself. You have to train an organization, and it has to be okay to speak truth to power and say that the emperor doesn't have any clothes. And that's very, very rare.
Willie, I'm going to use my power that I have video and raise my hand. And something's been on my mind. I hope it doesn't seem too crazy, but the things you just said really forced me to raise it. So you may be familiar with the television program Undercover Boss.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in all seriousness, do you think part of the process, whether it can really be pulled off, that would be value is to have C-suite people somehow get real life grit in some of these sub functions that are going on in the organization to get a better view, or is that a truly naive thought?
Absolutely. You've got to do that. I'll tell a story. I gave a talk in 1991, maybe, or two at ETRO, which is European Technology Roundtable exhibition. And a couple of the speakers, I was a speaker, Bill Gates was a speaker, and we had a speaker meeting. And we broke from that meeting, and a little later on, security said, "Oh, you know, we can't find Mr. Gates. We don't know where he's gone. If you see him, tell him we're looking for him." And anyway, long story short, I went out to dinner, came back, went down in the basement of the hotel, and was looking at the little card tables that were set up with the startups. And there's Bill Gates. And I said, "Hey, they're looking for you." And I said, just curiously, "What are you doing down here?" He said, "This is the leading edge. These are the people that are going to get me." Right? He's there. He's out seeing what's going on. Yamaha, when they wanted to change the way they designed their instruments and music, they didn't go to Carnegie Hall. They didn't go to the opera in Paris. They went to New Orleans. They went to Detroit. They went to blues bars in Memphis, right? To see how real musicians go hang out. And that's what the design thinking mentality is all about, is go empathize with the users and live with the users and see most of us, most of us wouldn't treat our animals the way we treat our customers in large companies. It's just, we're terrible. We're very tone deaf about it.
Thank you. That's a good point with a good story.
A couple of you have asked about digital currencies. What I know about digital currencies, you could put on the head of a pin. I do know that the underlying technology of distributed ledger technology is revolutionizing things as obscure as the art world. And so if we can put a digital tag and tracking on an image, then an artist who creates a song or a picture can get possibly paid for that. It's changing supply chains, et cetera. So, I think that the concept of a digital currency will come eventually. I think again, it's back to the fact that the currency itself and the technology to do it's there. We've got to work through the political and social implications of how does that work. Let's see here.
Oh, so Willie, we actually have a few folks that are queued up to speak directly into the room. I believe, Bill, you're unmuted right now if you'd like to.
That's great. So tell me who to go to first.
Bill, if you're available, Bill Howell, he had previously had the comment or referred to your comment about startup organizations being more successful with transformation and strategy. Mm-hmm. So Bill, if you wanted to expand on that or any of your other questions, I see that you had a few.
Bill?
Are you there? I know we had some audio issues earlier that were resolved. While we're waiting for you, Bill, to speak into the room, we also have Christopher Hoffman. Chris, I believe you're unmuted to speak directly if you'd like.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, Willie. No, I was just finding the conversation intriguing. I guess expanding on my comment earlier, in terms of how does digital transformation look like from the C-suite. What I didn't hear you say, and maybe you can comment a little bit more on, is in your experiences and maybe your conversations with others, are our C-suites still seeing digital transformation? Are they seeing it as a buzz? Is it just kind of on the hype curve right now? Are they actually finding that there's value there that they are going to be able to tangibly hook onto and do something with? I guess, what have you seen?
Yeah, so Chris, I'm an engineer, so I've got to answer with an equation, right? So the normal distribution's in effect, right? You've got the right tail, and some people are all over it and they're waking up. You've got the large middle that are sort of becoming aware of it. And there's a left-hand distribution that's just, forget it, it's a fad, it'll pass. I had a professor in engineering school back in the 70s who famously said there's a way that new technologies get adopted, and he called it the row method. And that's that row, first it's ridiculous, right? And then it goes to a phase where it's heretical, and it's heretical because it starts to challenge the status quo and tip over rice bowls and political structures. And then the final one is it's obvious, right? And so 10 years from now, 20 years from now, everybody's going to be saying, oh yeah, I saw that trend coming. I got us positioned for it. But it's all over the map now. And I think that's both the challenge and the opportunity, is really to go out and see what's working. And I think most of you on this call are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. I think there's a lot of hype involved with it. And that's why you've got to go live with this stuff. And I like what several of you put in the chat, and that's that it's not about the technology. It's not about digital transformation. It's about your real service of customers and satisfying your mission. That's what you want to think about, and then enabling that with digital systems engineering based tools and techniques. And that's really a different way of viewing the world.
Thank you, Willie.
Yeah. One thing I want to hop on is a lot of C-suites also are kind of deluding themselves in that they think, I'll just let really great digital transformation examples emerge and I'll buy them in the marketplace. The problem is, unless they use the techniques and transform their enterprise, that doesn't work. I mean, Apple is looking at and currently executing on 2 to 3 acquisitions a week. right? The companies that I worked with in the past, they were working at any given time, 13 to 15, 18 acquisitions at any given time, and they've got 60 on their radar screen. So these large corporations who have amassed huge sums of cash can buy these things, but you can't transform the enterprise by buying it. In fact, most of them bring the target companies into a dysfunctional siloed organization, lose most of the talent, and just run the way they did in the past.
Great point, Willie. And I think we got Bill Howell's audio back in. So Bill, feel free to chime in. Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was fighting with my some settings and that. A follow on to a previous question is the success transformation and strategy work. Do you see a parallel that and the sort of perennial issue that companies that are dominant in a market often lose out on the new concepts and technologies that roll through? Examples like Xerox and windowing on computer, or the graphical user interface, and Kodak, and on and on and on.
Yep.
Do you see a parallel between these situations? One's a digital transformation and the other one's a market orientation transformation. You did say that the marketing and business people are often key. Get them on board because they can see things that are happening, and it's easier maybe to get them to understand the necessity for change.
Yep. So Bill, I absolutely see it. You know, Clayton Christensen at Harvard talked about it. You know, it's so hard to change an entrenched organization, and complex adaptive socio-technical systems typically don't change easily. They don't change readily. They don't change quickly, and they collapse pretty spectacularly because they just will not change, because of all those incentives and all of those relationships get wired, and you just can't change them fast enough. You can't get people to change their mind. And the only people that can do that are the C-suite, to make people change and go through it. And even that's a hard thing to do. So we see it again and again and again, where new ideas occur outside of the dominant players because they can't occur inside. You know, using the DuPont identity, no Fortune 500 company is going to invest in innovation. They just won't. Right? Because innovation pays off long-term, costs you short-term. So if you've got earnings acquisition, you won't be really good at innovation. So that's why I mentioned this notion that a lot of large companies think they can just wait out innovation, let the venture capital folks, you know, create these companies, and then go buy the technology. And that works if you're just buying a technology, if you're buying a client list. It doesn't work if you're trying to transform an organization, because it has nothing to do with it. It's changing hearts and minds throughout the organization. And that's the hardest thing on earth to change is somebody's mind.
Anybody's been around Thanksgiving table.
Yeah.
For sure. Mike Parado, you're unmuted and able to reiterate your question if you'd like directly.
Thanks, Mimi, and hi, Willie. This is a terrific and much needed presentation, I think. In it, you noted that organizations must break old habits and integrate their silos. In my experience, that's also true of systems engineers and systems engineering.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how we have to change ourselves and our discipline?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this notion, and I realize this is heresy talking to this group, but I don't think there is such a thing as systems engineering. I think we engineer systems, and that's a very different way to think of the world. We use engineering disciplines to engineer the system. And I think that's the right way to think about it. And I would note that MIT actually changed their program to that designation and changed it back, right? Because, oh no, that's not the way the government buys systems engineering. So we really do have to look inside and stop leading with SysML diagrams and stop leading with systematic processes and start leading with systems thinking and taking a holistic systems approach. You know, I jokingly wrote about the fact that if you go to INCOSI's website and go to the CBOC and look at the disciplines that it says support systems engineering, they give you chemistry, physics, and more engineering and math. There's nothing in there about philosophy, nothing in there about the social sciences, nothing in there about business, nothing about people, right? And so we've got most of it we know starts with mental models, changing mental models. And we know that the axiologic realm, what we value, matters the most. And so if we don't deal with values and axiology and psychology, we're going to be tipped over for the rest of our lives. But that's just me, and I've already told Mimi she can shut off the feed to you know, to my.
If there was ever a point, it might be at that one.
It's what you're saying is incredibly important. And just to give one more example, I don't know how many people are familiar with ISO 42020, the new architecture, system architecture standard that was promulgated just a little more than a year ago. It defines 6 processes of systems architecting. And then within those processes, there are 45 activities that are required and 416 tasks that are recommended. And when I heard this from a person who was on the team that created it, I said, 416 tasks? And his response to me was, you counted them? And apparently I was the first one that had done that. So when we look at ourselves, sometimes we're caught up in this problem as the people we hope to change.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, there's some somewhat humorous, but also somewhat cutting observations on that. And I don't know if many of you know, but C. West Churchman wrote a classic treatise on the systems approach and its enemies, is what he called it. And the top 2 enemies of using a systems approach are politics, which you can imagine, no politicians want us to think holistically, and academia, right? We love our silos in academia. We want our disciplines to be pure. We don't like anybody messing in our disciplines. And you know, Calvin.
It's not just in academia. When I talk to students in companies and ask them to go around the room and tell me what they do, very few of them say I'm a systems engineer. They tell me they're an architect, a requirements engineer, a tester. Right. We've created our own silos.
Yep. And it's that damnable management paradox, is you have to take complex things and break them down. But if you're not careful, when you parse them, you'll set up this bounded rationality where my color is yellow, you're red, and so you can't your tool can't work because it's yellow, and you know mine's blue. It's just madness. But and that's why I spend my time in the social sciences and the soft side of it, because that's where all the leverage is.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, Calvin Coolidge famously said, changing a university or a large organization is like moving a cemetery. You'll get no help from the current occupants.
Wow.
Speaking of social sciences, many years ago now, 20, 9/11, I was chair of the Arlington County Community Services Board, which was mental health and substance abuse and activities. And it was like, okay, what are we going to do? Our community was attacked. We have 500,000 people here in the day working, and a lot of people are just PTSD right now. So everyone was thinking of these traditional silos, and what we ended up doing, me and another guy, we went to the chief head of health and wrote a FEMA grant to put 30 mental health experts on the streets for the next 18 months, just going up to people and asking them. And we were able to measure the metrics on the quality of mental health over that. But see, that's not in the books, right? As a traditional systems engineer, I would not have thought of that as a solution. That was more of a systemic thing, thinking about the whole system. That's a point.
Yeah.
Of using the social sciences, as you said.
It's much easier to sell a simple point solution to a lot of constituencies, and it sounds better in a sound bite. And So this is hard stuff to do, and
It wasn't easy, that's for sure. It's always difficult to break the change. Also, I have a comment right now on one of the sponsors that I'm working with, government sponsors, is outsourcing their entire educational benefits services. And the statement of objectives that went out with that had like a 2-page list of constraints. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. And I don't know, and you know, award's imminent, and I don't know. I joined just recently, so I wasn't on the original, you know, the top front of the acquisition strategy and planning for that. But I'm just like, wow, I got to figure out, and that's going to be really hard, how to whittle that 2-page list of constraints down to like 0 in order for the vendor to succeed.
yep. Well, and Dean, looking at your question, if it's that close to issuing, as you well know, the vendors have already shaped the procurement. They already have their thing. So getting one of these things to stopping a government project or a contract is almost impossible once it gets in motion. I jokingly talk about the fact that it takes 1,000 yeses at a minimum to get something through most large, complex adaptive socio-technical systems. And it just takes one no. One contracting officer says, oh, nope, I'm just going to go with the old way. And that's why it's so hard to get to yes, to change, make these changes.
Exactly.
So there are a couple of other questions in here that I want to see, make sure we get to.
Mimi, we can continue a few minutes past the hour. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was muted. Absolutely. And Willy, it's up to you, because it looks like we have more questions than time. So whenever you're constrained,
No,
we can cut
good.
off and follow up after.
So, so Mohammed Chami, what do you think about the political issues in the context of DT, especially when it's stronger in other aspects? And that's what we've been talking about is the politics in a particular organization or not-for-profit. That's what swamps everything. That's part of the culture. And as we know, culture, it's an emergent property of the system. There are no dials, there are no things. You've got to go and change people's hearts and minds. So it just takes a really long time to do that, and people are stubborn. Charles Sanders Peirce, right in the 1860s, wrote about the fixation of beliefs, how the only time we're willing to change our beliefs is when we're uncomfortable with them, but we don't like it when we're uncomfortable, so we just go back to our old beliefs, and so it's a real problem in making those kinds of changes. One of the questions here was Isaac Lopez has a great one. Is part of the problem is a large digital transformation involves everything and everything in the kitchen sink, and a lot of customers don't like the big picture. They just want to see little windows, and that's where, again, I think if we can use our tools, not systems engineering, but some of the modeling tools and the systemogram tools to tell rich, engaging picture stories, we can talk about what the whole thing looks like and then build a process to get to those little successes. But again, hard to visualize, and it's hard to get people to, in a siloed organization, to have the scale and scope to think beyond all of those areas. So that's problematic.
And Willy, just circling back, you'd mentioned CBOC, so I wanted to give Rob Cloutier, the CBOC editor, a chance to respond, but also to your point about the human capital aspect of it. That is an entire area that CERC has as a research area and focus in terms of developing human capital to some of these ideas. But Rob, you're able to speak directly in response if you'd like. And not sure if Dan, you had any inputs, and Mike Panatti as a previous CERC principal investigator in technical leadership in certain similar areas as well.
Hoping Rob can speak. Rob, are you there?
Oh, I know we have two versions of Rob in here. So I'm giving both the ability to unmute, and Rob, whenever you'd like to chime in with a response. Oh, here we go.
Hey, I appreciate your comments about the CBOC, and you're absolutely right. I'd love to have that kind of information. With it being a volunteer organization, I need authors that are willing to make those contributions for things like philosophy, for things like business, for the different areas that you spoke about.
Mhm.
I'm all open to contributions for articles in those areas, and we'll figure out where to put them. We'll put them in Dan DeLaurentis's section, or put them in some of the core sections. We always are looking to expand the participation in the CBOC, and I could not agree with you more.
Mhm.
That those need to be there. I've got your book. I've read it. I love it. It's not the first time I've listened to you speak. So thank you for your insights. I guess that's my 2-cent plug to anyone on the line, that CBOC is always looking for contributions, because it's the authors that make CBOC what it is.
Absolutely, Robin. And I'd be happy to continue to try to get these notions across. But as someone on the call mentioned, is every organization, including INCOSE, including SERC, including they have strong foreign antibody response systems that will kick in and try to get rid of those irritants, right? So I've gotten a lot of pushback when I've tried to add that to the CBOC, but I'm happy to continue to try.
Well, you're talking to the right guy now, so we can make it happen.
Right. I know a guy who knows the guy, right? We could get it done. All right.
Well, and I'll just add the part of the CBOC that I've been asked to serve as editor is a new part 8, which is emerging topics. And I think hopefully Rob can, in front of everyone, correct me, but I think in part that's looking at things that maybe haven't received the attention and maybe have emerged in fits and starts over the years, but it's now time for that message and that topic to truly emerge in the consciousness of the community. So happy to talk, Willy.
Yeah, and Joris van den Aker has put in a couple of very insightful questions and observations, and one is that many SEs believe that analysis and structure will lead to value, and C-suite is more external and synthesis oriented. And that's what I started the talk off with, is that's just a difference in mindset that the C-suite has, is they're looking outside and upward and outward, and we're typically looking down. And so we really need to reinvent ourselves and have systems engineers think that way. And it's not the way we do it. I was part of a group trying to add some of the social sciences to an engineering department, and the accrediting body said, sorry, that's not engineering, can't have it. So there are all kinds of structural challenges to making these changes. Yours also points out that how about systems thinking for marketers and financial people and logisticians? When I did this in my organizations, when I would bring in people from IBM, from Philips, from Siemens, from Apple, and hire them and teach them systems thinking. And the universal response to that first day of orientation in systems thinking was, where has this been hiding? Why don't we teach more people this? I don't know. I've been trying to get organizations to add systems thinking to their systems or to their corporate universities for years, because if we don't, you're going to have people continue to think that the disciplines are important. And as Peter Senge said, systems thinking is the discipline that integrates the discipline. So we absolutely, I think, have a huge opportunity and challenge in front of us.
Yeah, this is Joris. I'm from the Netherlands, and I think this is a big issue in the Netherlands today. There are a lot of discussions on this topic, and one of the challenges that we are facing is that we have a very strong faculties, and then the question is, where should we put or position system thinking, systems engineering within this traditional faculty structure? And so I think we are fighting also old structures and see how we can.
Absolutely, academia is one of the most siloed, politicized organizations I've ever seen anywhere. And like you say, you You're not rewarded for an interdisciplinary thought. You're not rewarded for presenting across disciplines. So it's a real problem in academia.
Yeah, so that leads me to the second question that I ask is, to what extent is system thinking valued as an academic science? I'm not sure how that's done in other countries. Do they really value it as an academic science, system thinking, or is it more an integration of many disciplines? I don't know.
It depends on where you go, but I don't find it highly valued because, again, it's a threat. And this is what C. West Churchman wrote about in The Systems Approach and Its Enemies, is that it's a threat to the existing structure and the existing silos and power structures, and people just don't like that. And so it's much easier to just, push it aside and not deal with it. But to me, it's every time I teach my systems thinking class at an undergraduate university, students come and say, this should be required for everybody as a freshman. We just have to start thinking this way, because if not, I mean, if you just take a view of the planet Earth from space, this marble is going to get to be pretty ugly if we don't.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, Willy, to your point, there are, there's the Worldwide Directory of Systems and Engineering and Industrial Engineering programs that we made available on the SERC website, but it does highlight how different universities have integrated systems engineering within their engineering colleges, and others, like Stevens, has an entire school dedicated for systems engineering. But it's something that it seems to be changing and moving, but it is strange how you mentioned, I forget what your example was, but how, was it MIT that had their program established in one view and then kind of flipped back?
Yep.
It is interesting to see how that needle keeps on moving back and forth.
Yep.
And we have such an influx of questions. Forgive me for jumping around a bit, but I believe David Wu has been able to unmute and can ask his question directly.
Okay.
So David, if you'd like to go ahead, otherwise I can reiterate it for you. It's kind of taking that C-suites understand the importance of digital transformation. But yeah, David, feel free to
So hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so this is I'm more in industry, so I kind of I know system engineer, system thinking portion. I need spend more time on that to get to know, read your book, do all this stuff. Specifically, it's very helpful for your presentation over here. What I'm struggling at is about how do I really apply system engineering or system thinking into my organization. And over here, what I work really hard to get all the things in place to make my customers successful, all the other stuff. The issue come along, the feedback is really organization structure and funding. The organization structure, each of us within a specific department. We get our boss, we get our whatever it is, and then furthermore, later before we got the project manager, now we got this agile product manager. And then the funding wise, specifically limited ourselves what cannot do. Example is if it's maintenance, we have one charge number. If it's deal with that capital, development, we got a different charge number. So a lot of time in our real cases, we really need kind of enhance our system, move further. So it's really find out how we gonna break down the organization structure, convince the C-suite, and have this kind of communication, and then also discussion, and and also have the funding support to get the work done. The reality, a lot of this come along, you get, like you said, moving to graveyard is really difficult. They don't want to move. They want you to prove your suggestion, your answer, whatever it is valid or is good. It take very little time, taking nothing. But reality, when we have a complicated problem, it take a complicated solution. So how do I, I'm really, I mean, I'm as move up to corporate ladder, I'm getting better, but reality is hard though with those, you know, situation with the organization structure funding. Do you have any thought, anything? This is
I
more
do,
specific.
David, and I'm going to also use your question to answer Rodney Martin's question, which is, are there best practices and hacks that you can share to effectively negotiate these imposing cultural barriers? And the best thing I've found is what I call jujitsu, and that's, you all familiar with that, is using the organization's leverage and strength against itself. If you reveal the archetypes of the ridiculous behavior that we all see, and they're predictable, you can see it coming. So if you can expose those and let people know, and they can see themselves and they can see why they're doing it. It's that Homer Simpson sort of doze slap of, you know, when the light bulbs go on. So that's what the hope is that when people see it, and that's the other thing I would tell this audience, is that's the good news. We know that if you get everyone in the system aligned the right way, you can unlock an unbelievable amount of energy and power for the good. And so, you know, if you look at the Gartner results of organizations, upwards of 80% of all the employees in organizations say they're either actively disengaged or disengaged at work. That's a management failure of the highest order. It's just awful. And that's a leadership problem. So we should be using that against the leaders to say, let's engage these people. But to do it, we're going to have to unlock the cells and let the prisoners out and let people see the system in its entirety. But that's as a number of you have pointed out, that's a risky proposition for the C-suite. They don't want to do it. And so we've got to enlighten them by showing them these models and showing them how it can work.
Yeah, really, I think that goes to Ed Gould's question, which seems more to be a statement saying people at the top levels of organizations have succeeded in their careers, but that occurred in the past years. The past may not look like the present in the future. So therefore those top level management tend not to be experienced or comfortable with that current leading edge.
Right. Yeah, so Todd Jick at Harvard wrote a great thing about change management, and his point was, for the organization to change, you have to get everybody as uncomfortable with the status quo as you are. So share that with them. Share why you're uncomfortable. Here's what we're missing. Here's what competitor X is doing in digital transformation, to use the topic we're talking about today. Whatever it is, you know, fear can be a great motivator.
And to your point, I mean, we're on a platform that was created by, you know, Zoom was created from a previous WebEx engineer. And I think they had tried to get the status quo a little bit more uncomfortable with it, with the status quo and everything. But finding, I guess, too much opposition, went out and created a new company,
Yep.
a competitor.
Yep.
So it speaks to that a bit. And sorry, David Wu, you can unmute yourself. It looks like you had a follow-up. I see your hand raised and virtually raised.
So another thing I will share with everybody is the other things I noticed some of this behavior, even some of the result. So there's sometimes I can't control it. I can't, you know, so I just let it fail. But before that, I already tell them, you know, what's going to happen. When they do see that do occur, they're just like you said, light bulb comes to their head. Oh, we should done this. We shouldn't done that. So that is like a hard thing to do, but sometimes we have to play that game and just to convince somebody.
Yeah, unfortunately. Shane has a very interesting observation. He said Mike won't work, but you know, he sees a large benefit in building up young engineers in the movement. And what advice would we have for an engineer who wants to go from the technical aspects of systems engineering to the management side, and therefore sort of be a digital native and not worry about it? And so Shane, I think you should have heard from this discussion, you've got to get good at the soft side, the people side. You've got to see different mental models of the way the organization works, not just the engineering models. You've got to get good at sensing people, being empathic, understanding their point of view, and leading people successfully is the way you make that transition.
Well, Willie, maybe we should wrap up because I fear that the questions will keep coming as great as they are. Is that okay?
That's fine. No, I'm happy to do it.
Literally, that they keep
They
coming.
keep
So this is awesome. So everyone who's still on board, which is an amazing number of participants still here, I promised you only good news, and I think Willie delivered. And Willie, the only problem I see is now the rest of the speakers in this digital transformation series have a very high bar. So I'll ask that they just try to meet close to the bar. How about that?
Well, that's you're nice to say that.
Really sincere thanks. This was fabulous, and just you know, I like all of us have been on so many webinars and online talks. The amount of interaction and thoughtful questions and engagement here has been unlike anything I've seen in the last year. So that's a testament to you. Thank you.
No, it's my great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And Mimi, I guess we're showing the fact that we have some upcoming talks to be TBD in terms of the people. We have people lined up. We're just trying to confirm things. Anything else, Mimi, we should say before we close?
The only thing I'll add in addition to my thanks to Dr. Donaldson is we'll try our best. I will be doing my best to capture everybody's thoughts and comments and try and match them into similar relevant streams of conversation. But we'll be posting the recording of this session as well as the slides that are already up on the event webpage on the SERC website. We may try to open this up to comments, that page, so that if there does want to be continued conversation, it looks like a lot of our commentators and folks posing questions have similar lines of questioning and experiences, I'll say, in the obstacles that they're encountering. So hopefully we can continue and take that summarization into the following digital transformation talks. But yes, the bar has been set pretty high for our kickoff.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
With that, thanks so much for joining us for this session, and we'll see you at the next SERC talk. We'll be happy to have you back in for that conversation as well. But we'll be sure to have all the registrants of this talk apprised of the next talk, as well as when this recording is available. So thank you again so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, folks. Be safe.
Thanks. Take care.